Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Damn, I even messed up my opening. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Anyway, so a bit over than a day ago, Dragon Man Deep Dive dropped and we get a quite significant amount of information that we can extrapolate there. One bit of it is good, one bit of it is not so good, but either way we're gonna go through it all and then we're gonna discuss where I think Dragon Man will land, because I personally have quite high hopes for the character. So first and foremost, we see that the detonation damage on a rank 3 6-star is 33k thereabouts. And that is quite substantial amount of chunk, but obviously it isn't kind of like game changing, considering that you do need to drop 2 level 2s in order to access it. However, the most important thing that we can see in this screenshot, and I'm going to zoom in right here, is that the Fury from level 2 does stack, and the fact that you will be able to get your level 2s relatively quickly, especially if you drop the first one right below 3 bars of power and then drop the second one when you just reach 2 bars of power, you're going to have quite significant kind of like uptime when you have these 2 Furies doubled up. Under certain conditions, after level 3 for instance, I believe you should even be able to get 3 Furies for some smaller amount of time. But the fact that these Furies last for 30 seconds is significant amount of time, and it's also gonna be kind of Dragon Man's salvation when it comes to the damage output, which was one of my personal biggest concerns about the character. But I think that doubled up Furies coupled up with the extra damage he gets when the opponents are cornered, and especially if they have buffs active on them, will significantly pump up his damage output to a very respectable standard. Additionally, being robot type of champion, I know many people will say that suicides might not be kind of like his forte, but I think his relationship with suicides will be kind of similar to Sentinel, where it might obviously be detrimental in longer fights, because a recoil is obviously a thing, but in a fight where you're gonna go for level 3, then 2 level 2s or 2 level 3s and a level 2 or something like that, will be quite sustainable way for Dragon Man to make his way through the quest, because vast majority of the fights will not last longer than 2 or 3 special attacks, which is quite significant thing to remember. Yes, obviously it's going to be similar situation to Sentinel, as I explained before, where special attacks are to be used more cautiously, but at the same time they are not a strict no-no, and the fact that you take no poison damage, you take no bleed damage, make that recoil damage quite a bit more tolerable. And yeah, so next up we can move that. Here we can see that we have uptime of 3 Furies for Dragon Man, and with this rotation he's actually doing a very solid damage to that Captain Marvel. Additionally, obviously you get the attack increase from opponent being cornered. In Captain Marvel matchup, it's also worth mentioning that Captain Marvel does not have any active buffs, or it doesn't have that new debuff that Dragon Man has access to. I completely blanked on the name for a second here, but we can see that the hits deal 4.7 thousand extra damage, and that is without having extra buffs on the champion. And yeah, that in my opinion is definitely quite a solid damage output there. And 58 hits, by the looks of it, he has dropped exactly 3 special attacks using suicides here, because the PI is higher than it typically was in the previous screenshots. You can see that 17k, I know it's class advantage, but it's quite clear that this image has suicides active. But yeah, 58 hits to take down a Realm Legends opponent that doesn't have any inherent buffs is definitely not too bad. So my scenario for this fight altogether has been that he simply has gotten to 3 level 2s and that's it, period. And he is able to output his damage output. So I have put my concerns for Dragon Man's damage output at ease 100%. He's not going to be the hardest hitter in the game, but he will definitely have ways how to get through fights relatively quickly, especially if you are aggressive and able to corner your opponents. Right. Next we can take a look at this particular damage output. This is the damage Dragon Man deals to your opponents when their armor broken. And the reason this is important is because you're going to be facing off against Dragon Man, and many opponents have access to armor break debuffs, not to mention that they might and can and are set of nodes that place armor breaks on Dragon Man. Thus, you might be encountering this passive damage over time unwillingly whilst you're trying to get the Dragon Man down. We can see that a 4-star deals 64 per tick against all other classes except cosmic ones. Now, how does that translate to kind of like a relative 6-star rank 3? Luckily, in the video later on, we can actually see that against the Cosmic Champion 6-star rank 3 without suicides, because again, here we can see that the PI difference is quite significant. If we had 22k plus PI previously with Suicide Masteries, now then without Suicide Masteries, he's dealing 451 per tick for a Cosmic Champion, so he would be dealing about 200 per tick to non-Cosmic Champion. And that is important to keep in mind. Obviously, we all should kind of like keep in mind not to use armor break champions against this guy. But as I mentioned before, there might be situations where armor break is placed on Dragon Man via some node or via some tricky weird interaction. And that obviously might be quite inescapable passive damage. And that is still worrisome, because if it starts at the very beginning of the fight and lasts for the entire duration of the fight, there's quite a lot of damage to contend with. And I'm definitely interested, for instance, whether Gladiator Hulk will be able to mitigate this or any other kind of like good counters to that. But yeah, now we're gonna cycle back here. Here we can see that extra damage with that Inaptitude. I finally remember the debuff's name, Inaptitude. Already we can see that with 0 Fury buffs, even though the crit is only for 2.4k, which is definitely not a large amount of damage. However, again, in this fight there's no Suicide Masteries involved and there are no Fury buffs active. And keep in mind, those Fury buffs are extremely potent. We're going to jump in the game later on and check out how potent are those Fury buffs. But I think they were something like 60 or 100% of Dragon Man's attack, and they are 30 seconds. So those Fury buffs will be extremely important part of Dragon Man's damage kit. But at the same time, with a single Inaptitude debuff, if you're dealing 2400 damage on a hit, you're dealing 2000 damage extra whilst opponent's cornered. And again, just because these numbers are split, it doesn't mean it isn't a very, very solid damage output put together per hit. And that is going to be the thing that we kind of need to focus. Obviously here, against Venom, who is a champion with a lot of buffs, again, even with no Suicide Masteries, even with no Furies, we have significantly higher extra damage here, and you deal 3200 extra per hit. And that again is a very kind of like serious chunk of health there, especially considering that Dragon Man also benefits from opponents having majority of the buffs active, like Furies, Armor Breaks, Cruelties, Precision, so on and so forth. And yeah, so we did showcase this before about the damage. Here we have the heavy attack damage once again, and the last bit, what was it here? Also just kind of like a showcase, even without Suicide Masteries, when you go for a 2 level 2s, and I believe that's close to everything that has been thrown in this fight, probably a level 1 and 2 level 2s, 65 hits in with no Suicide Masteries, Captain Marvel is down to 44% health, and at this point you already have 2 Fury buffs active, thus your damage output will be quite significantly increased for like the next probably 15 to 20 seconds. And I'm quite confident that Dragon Man without Suicide Masteries will quite easily finish that fight out under 100 hits. So again, I don't think he's going to be the heaviest hitter in the game, but I definitely do think that he will have fairly solid damage output, probably somewhere on par with Sentinel, because also Sentinel you have to put in a little bit of work before you can kind of like hit really hard. Dragon Man's going to be kind of similar. You're going to need to drop that level 3 and level 2 or level 2s in order to kind of like properly see the damage output that he can display. Now, if we jump in game, obviously at this point, thankfully we can already see the champions that have not yet been added to the game. And we can scroll down. Where is that Dragon Man? Here we go. Looks awesome, by the way. I absolutely love the way he looks. And we're going to check out his abilities. And on level 2, that Fury... Where is that Fury? 1 power charge increasing for 2600, and his attack at this point would be 4000, so that would be about 60%. So it's kind of similar to Doom's level 3 Fury. And we all know how significant damage increase that Doom's level 3 Fury provides. I think this might work out something like 60% and Doom's Fury 70%, but you can stack these up to 3 ideally, and you can access these quicker because they're level 2s. And yeah, all in all, I think as for this character, I have put my doubts on damage output for him away. I think I know where his damage is gonna lie. I just hope he's very compatible with kind of like new nodes in offensive capacity, because overall there's definitely a lot of potential with his immunities, with his slow debuff, with his Incinerates, Furies, level 2, extra power gain, all that stuff. I think he will have a relatively solid place in kind of like competitive model concept champions, and I can't wait to get this guy and play around with him and see whether I was right or wrong. Now, it is also quite evidently clear that Dragonman will definitely have a lot of defensive potential. His animations are quite, I'm not gonna say overly tricky, but they're very imposing. His level 1 kind of like chases you down halfway through the screen, and that will always be a problem in kind of like harder matches when you try to avoid getting cornered, and getting cornered against this guy is super painful. And level 2 obviously is also something that you need to learn to avoid. And extra power gain is always hard to deal with. Yes, you can disable it by parrying the guy, but obviously stun immune nodes exist quite frequently, or even more so relatively recently we have seen nodes like stunning reflection and stun opportunity or something like that, where you effectively can get punished for landing stuns on opponents. So yeah, I expect him potentially to be quite significantly problem guy on defense, because he's bleed immune, he's poison immune, you don't want to armor break him, and those are like the 3 most common debuffs, especially bleed and armor break. So he's immune to bleed, which is most common damage over time debuff, and he's immune to armor break, which is the most common non-damaging debuff available in game, and that is going to come and play much more often than most people potentially realize at the first glance. And all of these qualities combined, as well as being the first and unique Mystic Robot champion, I think, yeah, definitely makes him a desirable champion to acquire. In my opinion, by far the better of the 2 champions released in the month of August. I think he's vastly better than Airwalker and vastly more useful. And this is a champion I would personally try to acquire myself. But that is pretty much it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys liked this objective deep dive breakdown. And if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya!